Can you be my girl again? Alice Whitmore stopped writing. Her pen froze mid-stroke before she lowered it with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. Slowly, she raised her head, her blue eyes locked on him, cool as winter steel. "A man who can't afford a morning coffee," she said, voice low but slicing, "dares to ask me that?" The room seemed to contract. Henry felt heat rush up his neck. "Alice, is it not true?" Her tone didn't lift, didn't shake. It simply pressed forward, relentless. "You walked in here wearing a jacket that isn't yours. You parked outside in a truck that sounded like it needed prayer more than gasoline. And now you're standing in my office, Henry, and asking me about love? I didn't come to ask for." "Then why are you here?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Years of boardrooms had taught her how to cut a man without volume. If not to ask for a job, or a loan, or a favor, then what? Henry took a step toward the desk. She lifted a hand, warning. "Don't," she murmured. "Don't take another step." He froze, not because he feared her, but because he knew that tone soft, controlled, trembling beneath its armor. It was the voice she used when her heart was trying not to show. "Alice," he said quietly, "we haven't seen each other in 15 years. I thought maybe we could talk?" She let out a breath short, humorless. "Henry, I don't have time for small talk with ghosts. I'm not a ghost. Aren't you?" She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You vanished. You didn't call. You didn't write. Then your company collapses and suddenly you're back in this town, standing in front of me. The timing is convenient." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Do you really think that's who I am?" "I don't know who you are." Her jaw tightened. "Not anymore." A thick tension filled the room. Outside the windows, the city shimmered, busy and uncaring. Inside, two hearts beat much too loudly for the small distance between them. Henry exhaled slowly. "Look, I didn't come here to take anything from you." "Good," she said, "because I have nothing left to give you." That one landed. Hard. Henry's chest tightened. "You don't mean that." "I absolutely mean that." She rose from her chair, a sudden, crisp movement. Her heels struck the floor with a sharp rhythm as she circled the desk. "Look at me, Henry." He did. Even angry, even cold, she was luminous. "I run a multi-billion-dollar company," she said. "Every hour of my life is monitored, questioned, scrutinized. I don't have room." Her voice faltered. Just a crack. But Henry heard it. "For surprises," she finished. "Not from anyone. Especially not from you." He opened his mouth. She cut him off again. "And don't say you came to check in. People who care don't wait 15 years. You think I didn't care? I think you didn't stay," she snapped. Silence again. Thick, tense, heavy with everything unsaid. Henry took a careful breath. "Alice, I lost everything, so I heard. And I didn't come here because of that. I came because what?" Her eyes suddenly shone, not with softness, but with fury fighting hurt. "Because I was convenient? Familiar? Because your life fell apart and you needed a memory to hide in?" "No," he said sharply. "Because you mattered to me. You always did." She blinked, but if the words shook her, she didn't show it. "Henry." She crossed her arms again, hugging herself without touching her skin. "You can't just walk into my life and expect me to open the door like nothing happened. I'm not expecting that." He said, "I'm asking for a conversation. We're already having one. A real conversation. This is real." Her lips tightened. "And it's over." She moved toward the door. He followed a step. She stopped immediately, spine straighter. "Henry, please don't make this harder." He swallowed. "I don't want to walk out like this." "Then you shouldn't have walked in." She reached for the doorknob. "Alice, wait." She didn't turn, but she didn't open the door either. That small hesitation lit something inside him. one faint glimmer that the girl he loved still lived somewhere beneath the CEO veneer. "Just tell me one thing," he said softly. "When you said that about the coffee, did you mean it?" A long pause. "Yes," she whispered. "But not for the reason you think." That stunned him. "Then why?" She drew in a slow breath. "Because when I saw you standing there, the first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was—" Another long pause. Fear. He stepped closer, just one step, careful, respectful. "Fear of what?" She finally turned. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with memories she wished she could bury. "Fear that if I let you talk," she said softly, "I wouldn't be able to say no." Henry's breath caught. Her walls shot back up. "Go home, Henry, please." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, slow, reluctant. "This isn't over. It has to be. Tomorrow," he said, voice steady. 10 Not as a CEO, not as a failure, just us." She hesitated. 1 second, 2, then gave the faintest nod. Barely there, but enough. He left the office with his heart pounding, his mind racing, his hope tattered but alive. Behind him, alone in the quiet room, Alice pressed a trembling hand to her chest, then steadied herself, straightened, and put her armor back on. Both of them knew tomorrow would break something open. The only question was what. If Henry and Alice's story has stirred something in you, don't forget to like this episode, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for the next chapter. Your support helps these stories find the people who need them most. Henry drove through town like a man outrunning his own pulse. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, the old truck rattling down Main Street as if echoing the chaos in his chest. He kept hearing her voice, every cold syllable, every tightly controlled breath. "A man who can't afford a morning coffee dares to ask me that?" He'd heard insults in his life. He'd been underestimated, dismissed, patronized. But nothing had ever hit him like that because it wasn't her cruelty that cut him. It was the truth that sat behind it. The fear she'd tried to bury. Fear of him. Fear of herself. Fear that time hadn't done anything to kill what once lived between them. He pulled into Aunt Lila's driveway, barely aware he'd made the turn. The porch light glowed, though it was still early evening, casting its familiar gold over the chipped steps. That light had been burning as long as he'd been alive. A beacon, a warning, a welcome. Tonight, he wasn't sure which one it was. Aunt Lila was on the porch, rocking in her chair with a blanket around her shoulders, though the night was warm. "Lord have mercy," she said without looking up. "That's the walk of a man who either proposed or got himself rejected." Henry froze on the bottom step. "How do you always know?" "Because I raised you." She nodded toward the empty rocking chair beside her. "Sit. Don't make me crane my neck." Henry sat, elbows on his knees, staring at his shoes. "She barely looked at me." "Oh, she looked at you," Lila corrected. "She looked so hard she nearly burned a hole clean through you. She was angry. She was scared." Henry rubbed his face with both hands. "She said I had no right to walk into her office, that I'm a ghost, that I waited until my life fell apart." "Well," Lila said, "did you tell her she was wrong?" "I tried." "No, Henry." Her voice sharpened. "Did you tell her the truth?" He hesitated. "I don't know what the truth even is right now." Lila gave him a long, steady look, the kind that saw through his words, saw through him. "Then let me say it for you. You didn't lose everything and crawl back to her. You lost something long before the money ran dry. You lost yourself, Henry, and she was the last piece you remembered." Henry swallowed hard. "She told me she'd say yes if she let herself talk to me." Lila's eyes softened. "Then she ain't as cold as she pretends. She also said she doesn't know who I am anymore." "Do you know who she is?" Henry leaned back, staring at the streetlights flickering through the trees. "Not this version of her," he admitted. "She's so controlled, so calculated, so different." "Different isn't a crime," Lila said. "Neither is surviving. That girl's been holding the whole Whitmore empire on her back since her father passed. You think that doesn't leave marks?" You think she still? He couldn't finish the question. Still feels something? Lila asked for him. Baby, anyone could see it. The whole town could see it for years. The only people too stubborn to see it were the two of you. Henry let the truth settle in the quiet hum of the porch. Crickets chirped in the tall grass. A car rolled by, headlights sweeping across the water tower like a slow-moving lighthouse. She agreed to see me tomorrow, he said softly. 10 a.m. Then you better show up like a man who ain't afraid of his own heart. Lila rocked forward. And Henry, listen close now. Don't you step in there looking for apologies, and don't you drag in old ghosts. You go in to listen, to lay down your pride. Pride won't warm your bed at night, and it sure won't fix what's been broken between you two. I know, he said. But I'm ashamed, Lila. Of being broke? She scoffed. Honey, everybody's been broke. Ain't nothing shameful about that. No, he said. I'm ashamed I left, that I never looked back. Lila's rocking slowed. Her voice dropped to a gentler register. Henry Reed. You left to chase a future she begged you to chase. That girl pushed you out of this town with both hands. Did you think she did that because she didn't care? She did it because she loved you, and she didn't want you tied to this place, tied to her father's shadow, tied to those railroad tracks. Henry closed his eyes. He could still see Alice at 17, crying silently beside the station, whispering, Go. Don't look back. Don't stay for me. He had listened. Too well. Lila continued. You think she don't carry that with her every day? Every time she signs her name on a Whitmore contract, she remembers your daddy coming home with his back hurting. Every time she looks at that factory, she remembers the Reed men who broke their bones to build the Whitmore's money. You think she ain't fighting her own ghosts? Henry exhaled a long, trembling breath. Lila reached over and patted his arm. Tomorrow ain't about who you used to be, Henry. It's about who you can be now. For her. For yourself. He nodded, though doubt still twisted inside him. And put on a decent shirt, she added. If she's gonna break your heart again, at least look sharp. He laughed despite himself. I don't think this is funny. Oh, it ain't, she said. But it's life. And life's got a sick sense of humor. They sat for a while, listening to the cicadas, the world slowing just enough for Henry's pulse to settle. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? He asked. Lila didn't hesitate. Baby, she forgave you before you even asked. The question is, can she forgive herself? Henry's head snapped toward her. Forgive herself for what? For letting you go. Lila rocked again, eyes drifting toward the distant factory lights. And for wanting you back all this time. That struck him harder than Alice's harshest words. A slow warmth spread through his chest. Hope, fragile and dangerous. Get some sleep, Lila said. Tomorrow's gonna shake loose truths you both been afraid to touch. Henry rose, kissed her forehead, and went inside. But long after the lights were off, he lay awake listening to the hum of the old house, the ghosts of childhood echoing through its beams. He stared at the ceiling, replaying Alice's voice, her anger, her trembling, her fear. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., he would face the woman who had built walls taller than Whitmore Tower, and he would walk in not as a man who'd failed, not as a man begging for love, but as someone finally willing to confront what he'd spent half his life running from. The truth, the hurt, the hope, and the girl who once whispered goodbye at a train station but had never truly let him go. Henry slept badly, drifting in and out of shallow dreams that felt more like memories clawing their way back to the surface. By the time the gray light of dawn filtered through Aunt Lila's lace curtains, his stomach was tight, his mind restless, and his heart pounding with a mixture of dread and longing. Today he would face Alice again, not as a boy leaving, not as a man returning in ruins, but simply as someone who owed her the truth. He showered, shaved, and chose the best shirt he had, a crisp white button-down Aunt Lila had ironed, with the precision of a military veteran. Stand up straight, she commanded as she handed him a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon. You're walking into that building like you belong there. Do I? He muttered. Yes, child, because she asked you to come. He didn't argue. He just ate, thanked her, and left the house with nerves thudding in his chest. The morning air was still cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and magnolia. As he drove through town, he passed the landmarks of a life he'd abandoned without understanding the cost. The faded diner sign where he and Alice used to split pecan pie, the church where his father's funeral had been held, the old railroad tracks cutting across Willow Street, the same tracks that had once separated the Whitmore estate from the workers' quarters. His father used to say those tracks weren't just steel and wood, they were a line drawn across dignity. Henry pulled over there without meaning to. He stepped out of the truck, walking to the tracks, staring down at the rust and weeds that had swallowed parts of the rail. "These tracks don't run anymore," a voice called from behind him. Henry turned. Mr. Turner, the retired factory foreman, approached with a slow, measured gait. His back had bent over the years, but his eyes were as alert as ever. "Morning, Henry," he said. "Heard you were back in town." "Just for a little while," Henry replied. "Figured you'd come by here sooner or later." Turner nodded toward the tracks. "This place still haunts folks like us." Henry swallowed. "You think I'm haunted? Boy, you walked away from a life that tried its best to bury you. That doesn't make you haunted. That makes you lucky." Turner glanced down the street toward Whitmore Tower rising in the distant skyline. "But that girl, she's been fighting ghosts since the day her daddy died. Running a company built on the backs of men like your father? That kind of weight doesn't let a soul sleep easy." Henry's chest tightened. "She doesn't owe me anything." "Maybe she doesn't," Turner agreed, "but she owes herself the truth. Same as you." Henry looked back at the abandoned rails. He remembered being 16, standing here with Alice in the moonlight. "Promise me something," she had whispered. "Promise me that you won't let this town limit you, that you'll leave when you get the chance," he had promised. Because he loved her, because he didn't want her to feel trapped by him, because they were both too young to understand that leaving isn't always the same as moving on. "Go on," Turner said gently. "You've got somewhere to be." Henry nodded and got back into the truck. As he drove toward Whitmore Tower, a strange clarity settled over him. He wasn't going to plead or justify or bend. He was going to tell the truth, his truth, and he would finally hear hers. At 9:56 a.m., he stepped into the marble-floored lobby of Whitmore Global. The receptionist, a young woman with braided hair and a polite but guarded smile, looked up. "Can I help you?" "Henry Reed. Miss Whitmore is expecting me." Recognition flickered in her expression, not just of him, but of the tension hovering around his name. "Yes, sir. You can go right up." The elevator doors closed, and Henry braced himself as he rose toward the 42nd floor. The hum of the elevator felt too loud. His heartbeat felt louder. When the doors slid open, Alice was standing there waiting. Not behind her desk, not checking her watch, just waiting. That alone nearly unstrung him. She wore a navy suit, her hair pulled back, her posture perfect. But her eyes were not the ice they'd been yesterday. They were wary, exhausted, and something else he couldn't name. Not yet. "Henry," she said softly. Only his name, but it carried 15 years of everything unsaid. "Alice," he replied. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped aside and motioned toward her office. "Come in. We should talk." He followed her inside. The door whispered shut behind them. Sunlight poured through the windows, reflecting off polished stone and steel. It was a room meant for power, decisions, consequences, a room where he felt wildly outmatched. "Thank you for coming," Alice said, turning toward him. Her hands were clasped together, knuckles pale. "I didn't expect you to. I didn't expect you to ask," he admitted. "Well, here we are." Another silence stretched thin and fragile. Henry broke it first. "I need to say something. About yesterday." "Don't apologize," she cut in. "I don't want your apology. I wasn't going to apologize." That startled her. She blinked. "Oh." He stepped closer, not too close, just enough to be heard without the room swallowing his voice. What I said was foolish, but it wasn't wrong. Color rose in her cheeks. Henry, you can pretend you don't feel anything, he said softly, but you and I both know that isn't true. She paused, jaw trembling. Then she exhaled sharply and walked to the window, staring out at the city like she needed its noise to steady her. You think this is simple? She whispered. You think I can just open a door and let you walk back into my life like nothing happened? No, he said gently. I think it's complicated. I think it's painful, and I think you're terrified. Her shoulders tightened. I'm not terrified. Alice. She closed her eyes. Fine, she whispered. Maybe I am. Henry waited. She kept her back to him as she spoke. Do you know what happened the day you left? You told me not to look back, he said quietly. You remember that? I remember everything, he said. A trembling breath left her lips. The truth is, I told you to leave because staying would have killed you. She turned then, and he saw it guilt, deep and searing. This company wasn't built for boys like you, she said. It was built on their bones. Henry's chest tightened, grief for his father rising like smoke. I know, and I've spent years trying to fix that, Alice whispered, trying to undo what my family did. Henry stepped toward her. You don't have to undo the world to talk to me. Her eyes glistened, not tears, but something dangerously close. I don't know how to be around you anymore, she admitted. You make me feel like I'm still that girl standing at the train station, begging you to go. And do you still want me gone? He asked. Her breath hitched. For a long moment, she searched his face for something: certainty, safety, forgiveness. What she found instead was honesty, raw, unpolished, real. No, she whispered. I don't want you gone. The confession shook them both. Henry's voice softened. Then let's talk. Truly talk. Alice hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, but if we're doing this, her voice steadied, you need to hear everything. He nodded. I'm here. And as she crossed the room to sit, no longer a CEO commanding space, but a woman ready to face her past, Henry felt something shift in the air between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, something much more dangerous. Possibility. Alice sat down on the small sofa near the window, a space that felt strangely intimate compared to the command center of her desk. Henry hesitated only a moment before joining her, leaving just enough distance to be respectful but close enough for honesty. The morning sun cut across her face, softening the hard edges he'd seen yesterday. She looked less like the untouchable CEO and more like the girl he once knew, only older, wiser, worn from battles he had never witnessed. You said you wanted the truth, she murmured, folding her hands in her lap. So here it is. All of it. Henry nodded. I'm listening. The day you left, she began, eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the glass. My father told me something I wasn't supposed to repeat. Something about your father. Henry stiffened. What about him? He told me your father had filed a complaint with the company. About the conditions inside the plant. About the injuries. About the way the supervisors, especially the ones my father favored, were treating black workers. Henry's pulse quickened. He never told me that. Of course he didn't, Alice whispered, because he knew what it meant. Complaints didn't go anywhere back then. They disappeared. Henry clenched his fists. My father always said he hurt his back lifting equipment. Are you telling me he wasn't lifting equipment? Alice said gently. He was lifting the weight of other men's cruelty. Silence swelled between them, thick as smoke. Henry felt something inside him fracture, an old wound splitting open. Alice kept going, though her voice trembled now. The night before you left, he came to our house. He asked for a meeting with my father. He wanted justice, not for money, not for revenge, but for the men who worked beside him. Henry felt his breath leave him. The truth hit like a blow. Why didn't he ever tell me? Because he didn't want you burdened with it. He wanted you free. Henry bowed his head. Something deep inside him twisted hard grief for the man he'd lost, and guilt for the things he never knew. My father died still believing in that company, Henry whispered. Still working for people who broke him. I know, Alice said softly. And that's why I've spent the last 15 years trying to fix what they destroyed. It's why I fought to become CEO when everyone said a woman, especially the founder's daughter, would crumble under pressure. She looked at him then, eyes shining. I didn't take this job to live up to my father's legacy, Henry. I took it to change it, to make sure no one else's father walked into that factory and came out broken. Henry stared at her, stunned. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Because you were leaving, she said, and because I needed you to get out of this town before it swallowed you the way it swallowed him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I told you not to look back, because I knew that if you stayed, you'd spend your life fighting a machine that would crush you. He felt that truth down to his bones. He remembered her eyes that night, how they sparkled with tears she pretended weren't there. He had thought she was desperate to get rid of him. He hadn't known she was trying to save him. Alice, I didn't want to lose you, she said, shoulders shaking slightly, but I thought losing you to the world was better than losing you to this place. Henry reached out, stopping just short of touching her hand. He didn't want to push, didn't want to assume. But she noticed, and she didn't pull away. Why were you so harsh yesterday? He asked quietly. Why say what you did about the coffee, about me not belonging? She looked down at her hands. Because when you walked into that office, I felt everything I had buried for 15 years crash to the surface, and I panicked. Panicked? He repeated, disbelieving. You looked like you were ready to throw me out the window. That was panic, she insisted, because if I let you speak, really speak, I knew I wouldn't be able to do what was necessary. Henry frowned. Necessary? She hesitated. Then she said it. Keeping you at a distance. The words hit him harder than he expected. Alice, you don't understand. She drew a shaky breath. The board watches everything I do. Half of them think I'm too young. The other half think I'm too emotional. And all of them are waiting for the day I make a mistake they can use to push me out. Henry's temper flared, hot and sharp. So being seen with me would be a mistake? No, she whispered. Being seen caring about you would be. The room went still. Henry studied her face, the fear hiding behind the strength, the exhaustion hidden beneath the poise. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting everything she had built. And, in a twisted way, she was protecting him too. You think they'd come after me? He asked. They already dug into your past, she said. They know about the bankruptcy, the lawsuit, the failed contracts. They're framing you as reckless. Reckless, he echoed bitterly. Yes, reckless, emotional, unstable. I heard Richard Hale say you're a cautionary tale dressed in a borrowed suit. Henry's jaw tightened. Anger flashed through him like a match touching dry leaves. That bastard. He's worse than a bastard, Alice said. He's dangerous. Henry leaned forward. And you've been dealing with that alone? She gave a small, humorless laugh. Welcome to leadership. For the first time in years, Henry saw not the CEO everyone feared, but the woman carrying a mountain of responsibilities she never asked for. He took a breath, steadying himself. Alice, you could have told me. I couldn't, she whispered, because if I told you everything, you would have stayed. And staying would have ruined both of us. That hit him with a force he wasn't prepared for. He opened his mouth, but a soft knock interrupted them. Alice stiffened instantly. That'll be Richard, she said under her breath. We have a board prep meeting in 20 minutes. She stood, smoothing her suit, slipping instantly back into her armor. Henry rose too. Alice, before he comes in, are we okay? Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to him. No, she said honestly. Not yet. His heart sank. Then she stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that he felt her warmth. But we're not broken either. His breath caught. That's something, he murmured. She gave a fragile smile. It's everything. The knock came again, sharper now. Alice straightened, fully CEO once more. You should go. We'll talk again. When? Soon. He hesitated at the door. She didn't move, but her voice softened just enough. Henry, thank you for listening. He held her gaze for a heartbeat longer, then slipped out of the office just as Richard Hale arrived with a practiced smile and predatory eyes. As Henry walked down the hallway, something settled inside him, not peace, not certainty, but resolve. The past was no longer a ghost. The truth was on the table, and the tangled story between him and Alice Whitmore had only just begun to unravel. Henry didn't leave the building right away. He told himself he needed a moment to clear his head, but the truth was simpler. He couldn't force his legs to carry him out of Whitmore Tower, not after what Alice had revealed about his father, about the board, about the fears that had shaped her every move for 15 years. Instead, he wandered down the quiet corridor until he found an empty lounge overlooking the city. The room held nothing but a coffee machine, 2 leather chairs, and a panoramic view of Willow Ridge gleaming skyscrapers layered over the ghosts of the factories that had built them. He sank into a chair, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Reckless, he muttered under his breath, repeating Hale's words. A cautionary tale. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Another buzz, then another. Finally, he looked. Missed calls 3 from Aunt Lila, and a text. Baby, I saw Richard Hale on the news this morning. Be careful. He's not the kind to leave a man standing. Henry exhaled slowly. She didn't need to tell him twice. He pocketed the phone and stood, ready to walk out the door, when he heard footsteps approaching. Fast, purposeful. A woman's voice followed, sharp as a blade. Mr. Reed? Henry turned. A tall, impeccably dressed woman in her early 40s strode into the lounge. He recognized her immediately. Dana Hughes, Whitmore Global's chief financial officer. Alice trusted her more than anyone else on the board. Dana closed the door behind her. Good. You didn't leave yet. Should I have? Henry asked cautiously. Depends on whether you want to survive the next few days, she said briskly. She crossed her arms. Look, I didn't come here to scare you. I came because Alice won't. Henry frowned. Won't what? Warn you. About the trap being set. Henry's pulse kicked up. Trap? Dana nodded. Richard Hale saw you walk in this morning. He already called 2 board members, told them you're here begging for money. Henry barked out a shocked laugh. Money? Is that really what he said? You should know by now that perception is currency in this building. And Hale is wealthy in poison. Henry's smile faded. What's his angle? Dana hesitated. You really cared about Alice once, didn't you? I still do. Then, you need to understand something, she said. Hale has been circling her chair for years. The moment he finds a crack in her leadership, he'll strike. And you, Mr. Reed, are the crack he's praying for. Henry felt his jaw tighten. Why me? Because you're from the wrong side of the tracks. Because your father filed a complaint that could still ruin Whitmore's reputation if it resurfaces. Because you have history with Alice, history she can't hide. Dana stepped closer. And because powerful men are threatened by any truth they can't control. Henry absorbed that in silence. It fit. Too well. Dana lowered her voice. Listen carefully. Hale scheduled a casual dinner tonight with the board. He's planning to bring up your name. Not outright accusations, not yet just seeds. Doubt, concern, and if Alice defends you, he'll accuse her of compromised judgment. Henry felt heat rise in his chest, anger, fear, something fierce and protective all at once. What do you want me to do? He asked. Leave, Dana said simply. Today, before Hale gets ammunition. Henry shook his head. I can't walk away. Not now. Alice and you, Dana interjected gently, are exactly why you should leave. If she loses her position, everything she's been building, everything she's been fighting to fix, goes up in flames. Henry hesitated. His heart resisted. His instincts rebelled, but the logic dug into him like a thorn. If I disappear now, Henry said slowly. What does that do to her? What message does that send? That I'm a scandal she needs to hide? Dana considered him for a long beat. No, she said finally. If you leave now, she'll understand you're protecting her. Henry looked out the window. The world was so wide from up here, so deceptively calm. Alice was somewhere behind those glass walls, preparing for a meeting that could define her career. And he was here, being told he was the threat she couldn't afford. Dana, he said, turning back to her, do you think she still cares about me? Dana didn't even blink. Alice Whitmore would walk barefoot through fire to keep you safe. That's exactly the problem. Henry's breath caught. The confirmation jolted something deep inside him. Hope, guilt, longing. What if, he whispered, I don't want her to walk through that fire alone. Dana softened barely, but enough. Then don't let her lose her footing because of you. She checked her watch. I need to go. But Henry, think carefully before doing anything that puts Alice in the board's crosshairs. When she left, Henry stood alone again, wrestling with a storm that offered no right answer. Leave and abandon Alice when she had finally opened the door to truth? Stay and risk tearing down the career she built on the ashes of everything that once hurt them both? He was still lingering in that torment when the elevator doors opened and a voice thundered through the lounge. Henry Reed, Richard Hale. His suit was immaculate, his smile poisonous, his eyes sharp with calculated disdain. Well, Hale drawled, stepping inside. I suppose every company needs a charity case wandering the halls. Henry's muscles tensed, but he stayed still, calm, in control. I work here now? He said. Didn't realize. Hale smirked. You don't. But you're certainly trying to find a way in. Tell me, did you ask Alice for a job before or after you asked her to be your girlfriend again? The words were a knife. Henry said nothing. Hale stepped closer. Men like you, Hale sneered, always think affection is a shortcut to power. Henry's fists curled at his sides. He could almost hear Aunt Lila's voice. Baby, don't you let a small man turn you into a smaller one. Hale leaned in slightly. I'll make this simple. Stay away from Alice Whitmore. She is not for you. Henry met Hale's gaze squarely. That decision, he said quietly, isn't yours to make. Hale's smile vanished. I will bury you, Hale whispered. Financially, socially, publicly. And when Alice's career burns because of the mess you drag into her life, I'll be the one who takes her chair. Henry stepped closer, just enough to make Hale flinch. If you come after Alice, he said in a low, steady voice, you won't be dealing with the boy I used to be. You'll be dealing with the man I became. Hale stiffened. Then he scoffed and walked out. When he was gone, Henry finally exhaled. He didn't know yet how he would fight a man like Richard Hale. He didn't know how to protect Alice without losing her. But one thing had become brutally clear. This wasn't just a reunion. This wasn't just a fragile reconnection between two people with unfinished history. This was a battlefield. And the war had already begun. Henry drove back to Aunt Lila's house with the weight of the morning pressing against his ribs. The confrontation with Richard Hale replayed in his mind like a looping film, every word, every smirk, every calculated jab. He could handle insults. He'd lived with far worse. But the threat, I'll burn her career to the ground, that was something he couldn't shake. By the time he reached the little white cottage on Magnolia Lane, his knuckles were tight on the steering wheel, and his heartbeat felt too loud. Aunt Lila was waiting on the porch as if she'd sensed something in the air. Sit, she commanded before he even reached the steps. And don't pretend everything's fine. I've known you since you were knee-high and stealing biscuits off my table. You wear your emotions like a neon sign. He sank onto the porch swing, letting it creak beneath him. You ever feel like the past shows up not to haunt you but to test you? Child, the past doesn't test you. It reveals what you were too scared to see the first time. Henry exhaled. I ran into Richard Hale today, I figured. She folded her arms. Whenever the wind shifts nasty, there's usually a rich man's ego behind it. He gave a short, humorless laugh. He told me to stay away from Alice. Of course he did. He's been trying to shove her off that CEO chair since she sat her behind in it. Henry looked at her sharply. You knew that? Everybody with eyes knows that. Men like Hale don't become second in command gracefully. They simmer. Henry leaned forward. Aunt Lila, he threatened to bury me. Publicly, financially, and use me as collateral damage to hurt her. She let out a sigh, heavy with memory. Your father used to say something. When a man shows you his teeth, he's usually showing you his fears. The question is, what's Hale afraid of? Henry knew the answer instantly. Alice, not her failure but her success. He's planning something tonight, Henry said. A board dinner, Dana Hughes warned me. Lila's eyebrows rose. If Dana's talking, it must be serious. It is. He rubbed the back of his neck. She told me I should leave town. Are you going to? He hesitated. No. Good, Aunt Lila said, because a man running never won a fight worth fighting. But you listen to me carefully, Henry Reed. She pointed a stern finger. Don't you go barging into Alice's life like a tornado trying to fix everything. She's not a damsel. She's a woman who's been building armor while you've been licking wounds. Henry looked down. She told me part of the truth today. About my father. About why she pushed me away. Lila murmured. About time. Henry blinked. You knew? Baby. Half this town knew Whitmore Global chewed your daddy up worse than a bad harvest season. But Alice, that girl carried secrets heavier than anyone should. She could have told me. And you could have listened. But both of you were children back then. Hurt, scared, trying to survive in a world that wasn't built for either of you, just in different ways. Henry swallowed hard. Lila's tone softened. You're not that boy anymore, Henry. So the question now is, who are you willing to become? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. A text, from an unknown number. Meet me. 5 o'clock. Same tracks where we said goodbye. His breath caught. Only one person could have sent that. Alice. Go, Lila said, though he hadn't spoken. She's opening a door. Don't you dare let fear make you miss it. Henry left the house, heart pounding all the way to the abandoned train tracks, rusted rails, weathered wood, a landscape frozen in memory. Alice was already there, standing with her arms wrapped around herself, her hair tugged gently by the wind. She wasn't dressed like a CEO. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and an expression that held both fragility and fire. When Henry approached, she didn't look up immediately. I shouldn't have texted you, she murmured. The board dinner's in a few hours. I should be preparing. Why didn't you? He asked softly. Because I can't think straight. Now she looked at him. Really looked. Ever since you walked into my office yesterday, everything feels like it's unraveling. His breath tightened. Unraveling how? Like I've been holding my life together with threads, and you're pulling at them without meaning to. She stepped closer. Henry, when I became CEO, I promised myself I wouldn't let anything distract me from fixing the damage my father left behind. Not the board, not scandals, not pressure. Her voice broke slightly. And especially not you. Alice, but then you walked back into my life, she whispered. And you asked me a question I wasn't ready to hear. He remembered it vividly. Imkote lam ngui yewan lan nuachong. It had been reckless, honest, raw. Alice, he said gently, tell me what you're afraid of. Everything, she admitted. Losing my job, losing the company, losing everything I've worked to repair. But most of all, she swallowed, I'm afraid of losing you again. That stunned him, not because he doubted her feelings, but because she said them aloud finally, openly. Alice, he whispered, I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Yes, he said, I can. She shook her head, stepping back. You don't understand. Hale's already talking. He saw you in the building, and he's spinning it as desperation, as recklessness, as some old flame trying to manipulate me. Henry felt his jaw tighten. He wants you out. He always has, she said, but now he believes he found the weapon. Me, Henry said. Alice nodded, her eyes shining not with tears but with fury. Henry, I can fight him. I can fight the board. I can fight my father's legacy. But I can't fight all of that and… She trailed off. He stepped closer. And what? She looked at him as if the truth itself hurt to speak. And love you at the same time. The air froze. Henry's heartbeat faltered. Alice Whitmore did not use that word lightly. Alice, do you see the problem now? She whispered. If I choose you, I risk everything I've built. If I choose the company, I lose the only person who ever made me feel seen. Henry lifted a hand, slowly giving her every chance to step away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. What if you don't have to choose? She almost laughed. That sounds like a fairy tale. No, Henry murmured. It sounds like a plan. She blinked. A plan? You're fighting a war, he said. Let me help. Henry, not as your weakness, he said firmly. As your ally. She searched his face, looking for cracks, for doubt, for fear. She found none. Slowly, she exhaled. Tell me what you're thinking. He took her hands. First, we expose Hale before he exposes me. And second, he squeezed lightly. We rebuild something between us, carefully, quietly, truthfully. Alice's voice was barely a whisper. You think we can do that? I think, Henry said. The only thing more dangerous than you loving me is you trying not to. She let out an unsteady breath, a sound halfway between a sigh and a surrender. For the first time, she didn't step back. She stepped closer. If we do this, she murmured, there's no turning back. Henry lifted her hands to his lips, brushing them gently. I turned back once, he said. I won't make that mistake again. And in the dimming sunlight of an empty track yard, where their past had shattered and their present trembled, Alice Whitmore leaned her forehead against his and whispered the first admission of many to come. Then stay with me, Henry. Stay, and help me win this. Henry barely slept. Again. But this time it wasn't because of dread. It was because of resolve. Alice's words from the tracks reverberated through him long after he left her there. Stay with me, Henry. Stay, and help me win this. He lay awake imagining the war ahead. Richard Hale, the board, the buried truth about his father, and Alice caught in the center, carrying the weight of an empire on shoulders that deserved rest. By sunrise, Henry knew one thing. He couldn't afford to be reactive anymore. He needed to act, proactively, strategically, for Alice, for his father, for himself. Aunt Lila found him in the kitchen before dawn, hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee like he needed its heat to anchor him. You're thinking too loud, she muttered, tightening her robe as she shuffled in. Spit it out. I need the record, he said. The one my father filed. The complaint that disappeared. Lila froze. Slowly, she sat down across from him. Baby, you sure you want to stir that grave? I think the grave is about to be dug for me, whether I stir it or not, he replied. Hale already weaponized my past. It's time I get my hands on his. Lila studied him with the kind of gaze only older women possessed, one that could see past bone and memory straight into conviction. Your daddy kept a copy, she whispered. Hidden. That man trusted corporations about as far as he could throw 'em. Henry's breath caught. Where? I'll help you find it after breakfast. A man shouldn't fight on an empty stomach. Despite everything, Henry smiled. Lila cooked while humming an old gospel tune, something about burdens and rising again, maybe fitting, maybe prophetic. After they ate, she led him to the narrow hallway closet where her late brother's belongings were stacked in dusty boxes. He wrote everything down, she said. Every ache, every insult, every promise broken by those factory supervisors. Called it insurance. Henry felt a tightness in his throat as he opened the first box. A lifetime of a man who had worked himself into an early grave because he believed hard work in a broken system could still yield justice. There were pay stubs, injury reports, letters from co-workers, and then he saw it. A sealed envelope marked with his father's cramped handwriting. "If anything happens to me, this truth belongs to Henry." Henry's hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside was a 4-page written statement, detailed, meticulous, harrowing. Descriptions of safety violations, coercion, falsified injury logs, racial harassment, and the names of supervisors who covered it all. At the bottom, submitted to Whitmore Global HR. March 7th, no response. Henry's breath trembled. Anger surged through him, hot, controlled, precise. "This," Henry whispered, "is what Hale fears." Lila nodded. "Because if the world sees this, Whitmore Global will have to answer for it. And Hale's whole empire thrives on shadows, not truth." Henry folded the papers carefully. "Alice needs to know. She probably already does," Lila said. "But she needs you to have it. There's a difference." Henry didn't ask what she meant. He knew. By noon, he was in the truck, heading to Whitmore Tower again, but this time, he wasn't going in through the front door. Instead, he waited across the street, parked in the shade of a magnolia tree, watching as board members arrived for the evening meeting. Sleek cars, polished shoes, empty smiles. Then he saw her, Alice, stepping out of her chauffeured sedan, shoulders squared, jaw set, every inch the commander preparing for war. But her eyes flickered once, almost imperceptibly, toward where he sat. She had seen him. She kept walking, never breaking stride. She wasn't supposed to signal him, but she did, and Henry understood. Tonight mattered. For her, for them, for truth. He stayed until the building swallowed her completely, then drove to Hale's private office across town, the one Henry had researched that morning. If Hale wanted to destroy him, Henry needed to understand how, or at least find something Hale didn't want found. The lobby guard barely looked up when Henry stepped in. People didn't question confidence. They questioned hesitation. Henry walked straight to the elevator as if he belonged there. The top floor was locked with a keycard. Expected, but Henry had learned a lot about systems dismantling over the years. In the stairwell, he found the maintenance door manual lock. Old, rusted, easy. Inside the mechanical room were breaker panels labeled with circuits. He killed power to the upper administrative floors only. Alarms didn't go off. Good. With the power out, the stairwell access lock disengaged with a metallic click. Henry slipped onto the floor like a shadow. Hale's office door towered ahead, polished wood, heavy, imposing. Henry tried the handle. Unlocked. Wealthy men tended to trust expensive locks, not realizing fear made people careless. He entered quietly. The office smelled of cigar smoke and expensive cologne. Walls of framed accolades, a panoramic view of the city, and on the desk, an open file. Henry moved closer. The label read, Whitmore Global, CEO Performance Vulnerabilities. Inside were pages of strategy notes, probabilities, risks, scenarios for removing Alice Whitmore. And then Henry saw it, his own name, a section titled, Leverage Points, Henry Reed. Henry's stomach turned as he read the bullet points. Financial instability. History of bankruptcy associations with defunct contracting companies. Rumored relationship with CEO. Potential emotional compromise. Recommended strategy. Frame as opportunistic liability. Henry closed the file slowly. This wasn't just sabotage. It was an assassination plan. Not of character, of future. And Alice was the primary target. A noise at the door snapped him back. He ducked behind a cabinet just as footsteps approached. Hale's voice drifted in, annoyed. Get the backup generator online. I have documents to finalize before tonight's vote. Henry's heart hammered. Vote? What vote? Hale continued, pacing the office. If Whitmore defends him again, she becomes the scandal. The board will have no choice but to remove her. And once she's out. He let the sentence hang. Henry's fists curled violently, but he stayed still. He needed to live long enough to fight. Hale's phone rang. "Yes," Hale barked. "Set the dinner for 7, and make sure the reporter is there. If Whitmore slips, I want it recorded." Henry froze. Reporter. Hale wasn't just planning a board revolt. He was planning a public spectacle. If Alice defended Henry, she'd be ruined. If she didn't, Henry would become the scapegoat for the company's sins. It was a win-win for Hale, and a lose-lose for them. Henry slipped out during a brief moment when Hale turned toward the window, shouting instructions. He made it down the stairwell, into the truck, and drove until the tower was a shrinking silhouette in the side mirror. Only then did he let the shaking in his hands show. He knew what he had to do. He had to protect Alice, even if it meant walking straight into the fire Hale had set, because love wasn't about choosing safety. Love, real love, was choosing truth, even when truth carried consequences. And tonight, consequences were coming. Henry didn't go home. Not after what he'd seen in Hale's office. Instead, he pulled into an empty church parking lot, the same one where his father once volunteered on weekends and forced himself to breathe. The sun was beginning to dip, tinting the sky in shades of copper and violet. The world felt unbearably calm compared to the storm inside him. Alice was walking into a trap designed so perfectly that she wouldn't see it until the jaws had snapped shut around her. And Henry was the bait. He pressed his palms against the steering wheel. Think, Henry, think. He had the complaint file. He had proof Hale was orchestrating a sabotage campaign, but evidence meant nothing if it was released at the wrong moment. If he showed the board the file too soon, they'd bury it. If he showed Alice now, she'd panic, and Hale was counting on her panic. If he confronted Hale publicly, Hale would twist it into emotional instability. Every step Henry took had to serve one purpose: protect Alice, not his pride, not his anger, her, the woman who had been fighting alone for far too long. Finally, he turned the key and drove, not to Whitmore Tower, not to the board dinner, but somewhere else entirely. As he pulled onto Maple Street, the lights of the Willow Ridge Public Library glowed softly through the windows. A familiar silhouette inside moved from table to table, tidying stacks of books. Mrs. Gardner, the retired librarian, and next to her someone who could help him. Caleb, Henry murmured under his breath. Alice's younger brother, the only person besides Dana who truly understood the battlefield Alice fought on. The only person whose loyalty wasn't purchased by the Whitmore legacy. Henry parked and stepped inside. Caleb Whitmore looked up from the circulation desk, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his tie askew in that permanently tired but determined way he carried himself. "Henry?" he said, startled. "Shouldn't you be with Alice?" "I should," Henry replied, voice low. "But she doesn't know what Hale's planning tonight." Caleb's expression sharpened instantly. "What did you find?" They walked to the quiet reading corner in the back. The scent of old books and polished wood wrapped around them, safe, steady, grounding. Henry placed the folded complaint file on the table. Caleb's eyes widened. "Is that?" "My father's original written complaint," Henry finished, "the one that vanished." Caleb exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "This—" "Not just the company," Henry said. "Hale's entire strategy relies on painting Alice as unstable and compromised. Once the board believes she's acting irrationally, especially over me, he'll call for a vote." "A vote?" Caleb whispered. "Tonight," Henry nodded grimly. "He invited a reporter to the dinner. Whatever happens, he wants it public." Caleb swore under his breath, a rare, unfiltered crack in his carefully polished exterior. "Alice doesn't stand a chance unless we can control the narrative." "Exactly." Henry leaned forward. "I need your help." Caleb blinked. "With what?" "Timing." Henry spread out the papers on the table. "If we give these to Alice too early, she'll charge in swinging, which is exactly what Hale wants. If we give them to the board too early, Hale will bury them. But if we choose the right moment—" Caleb's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. We use Hale's trap against him. We wait until he tries to humiliate her publicly, Henry said, then reveal the truth in front of his audience. Caleb let out a slow whistle. That's bold. It's the only play, Henry replied. It keeps her reputation intact. It exposes Hale, and it forces the board to face the truth they've ignored for years. Caleb lowered himself into a chair, staring at Henry. Do you understand what you're walking into? Henry swallowed. Yes. Hale won't take this lying down. He's already taken too much. Henry's voice hardened. My father. Alice's peace. The future she's been trying to build. Caleb studied him for a long moment. You really love her. Always have, Henry said quietly. Caleb nodded, once solemn, resolved. Then we do this. Together. They spent the next hour strategizing, laying out contingencies, planning for every possible reaction Hale might orchestrate. Timing, delivery, witnesses, the reporter, what evidence Caleb could pull from the archives without raising suspicion. And when they finally stood to leave, Caleb gripped Henry's shoulder. Thank you, he said, for not running, for not leaving her to fight alone. Henry met his gaze. She doesn't deserve another battle by herself. Caleb nodded. No, he whispered, she really doesn't. They parted ways, Caleb heading to the tower, Henry heading back to Aunt Lila's to prepare. But as he stepped outside, the cool dusk air hit him with a sudden, startling realization. He hadn't thought once about what this would cost him. Not his reputation, not his safety, not the inevitable retaliation from Hale. All he had thought about was Alice. She had spent years carrying the burden of a legacy built on injustice. Years believing she had no right to love anyone outside that world. Years convinced that choosing Henry meant destroying everything she'd built. Tonight, he would prove her wrong. Tonight, he would stand beside her, even if she didn't know it yet, because real love wasn't soft or safe or gentle. Real love was choosing someone even when the world demanded you abandon them. Real love was courage. And for the first time in his life, Henry Reed felt brave. He reached the truck, pulled out his phone, and typed a message he doubted she'd see before the dinner, but one he needed her to have. Alice, trust me tonight. No matter what Hale says, no matter what he shows, don't react. I'm with you. I won't let him win. He hovered a moment, then added, not this time. He hit send. The phone chimed instantly. One reply. From her. Just 2 words. Hurry, Henry. The urgency in those words jolted through him. She wasn't asking him to save her. She was asking him to stand with her. And Henry, finally, fully, fiercely was ready. Tonight, the truth was coming. And so was Henry Reed. The restaurant chosen for the board dinner was the kind of place where chandeliers glowed like molten gold and the air smelled faintly of wealth-aged wine, polished leather, quiet power. Hale hadn't picked it for comfort. He'd chosen it for spectacle, for theater. For the kind of ambiance that smothered truth beneath silverware and ambition. Alice arrived precisely at 7. Composed, elegant. But Henry saw past it, the faint tension in her jaw, the way her breath shortened when she stepped through the front doors. She was walking straight into the lion's den, and she knew it. Henry, entering separately through the far side of the room, stayed where she couldn't see him yet. This wasn't the moment for reassurance. It was the moment for observation. Hale, of course, was already holding court. Standing near the head of the long table, a glass of scotch in one hand, his smile razor-thin and dripping with performative charm. Ah, Alice, he drawled loud enough for the nearby guests and the hovering reporter to hear. We were just talking about leadership challenges. Alice gave him a polite, frost-edged smile. How timely. You've always been an expert on challenges, Richard. A few board members stiffened, surprised she'd parried so quickly. Hale didn't miss a beat. Indeed, and tonight, I'm afraid we must discuss one in particular. Henry felt the room shift, the way an audience unconsciously leans forward when a play approaches its turning point. Hale gestured for Alice to take her seat. "We'll begin shortly." Henry slipped behind a column, heart steady, pulse controlled. He had texted Caleb 15 minutes ago. The response had been simple. "Evidence ready. Signal me when you need it." Now all he needed was the right fracture in the narrative. Hale tapped his glass sharply. The room quieted. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, the company stands at a crucial moment. Public trust, investor confidence, and leadership integrity are all under scrutiny." The reporter scribbled eagerly. Hale's smile widened, "And in times like these, we must evaluate every decision, every association that impacts Whitmore Global." A subtle shift occurred at the far end of the table. Alice's spine straightened. Henry braced. Hale continued, adopting a tone of wounded concern. "It has come to my attention that our CEO has recently reconnected with an individual whose history poses significant risk to the company." Murmurs fluttered like dark wings across the table. Alice kept her expression unreadable. Hale turned slightly, scanning the room with theatrical gravitas. A man with a record of financial instability, failed ventures, lawsuits, a pattern of impulsive behavior. Then, as if delivering a killing blow, and, most troubling, a personal history with our CEO. The reporter's pen scratched feverishly. Henry's jaw tightened. Hale let the words hang, poisoning the air with implication. Finally, Alice spoke. Calm, controlled. "Are you implying my personal life undermines my professional judgment?" Hale lifted a brow with mock sympathy. "Not implying, Alice. Simply asking if your emotional ties may blind you to potential threats." The table went still. Henry stepped from behind the column. Not into the center, not yet, just into Hale's peripheral vision. Hale's gaze flickered, just for a second. Uncertainty. Henry felt the shift, a tremor in the stage Hale thought he controlled. Alice noticed the flicker too. Her eyes flicked toward where Henry stood. A question in them. A warning. A plea. "Not yet," he thought. "Hold steady." She turned back to Hale. "Richard," she said quietly, "do you have evidence of misconduct? Or are you merely speculating about my character in front of a journalist?" Hale's smile sharpened. "Very well then," he snapped. An assistant stepped forward, holding a folder. Hale plucked it out with theatrical flourish. Henry recognized the crimson binding. The vulnerabilities assessment. Hale opened it, raised it, like a judge preparing to condemn. "This document," he announced, "details the risks associated with Mr. Henry Reed, his personal failures, his legal liabilities, and his potential to damage Whitmore Global if our CEO continues to indulge a relationship with him." Gasps. Whispers. Alice froze. Henry locked eyes with her. "Now." He stepped forward into full view, his voice steady, carrying across the table before Hale could speak again. "Interesting file you've got there, Richard." Hale stiffened. "What is he doing here?" "Finishing what you started," Henry said calmly. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Alice's breath caught, but she didn't look away. This time, she didn't distance herself from him. She held his gaze. Hale sneered. "Security will escort you out. You don't belong." "Funny," Henry cut in. "That's exactly what people used to say about my father." Silence, the kind that cuts marrow from bone. Hale's smirk faltered. "Your father has nothing to do with company business, doesn't he?" Henry asked softly. "What about the complaint he filed 18 years ago?" Alice inhaled sharply. Hale paled. Henry continued, pulling a folded set of papers from his jacket. "The complaint your father and later you buried. The one detailing safety violations, racial harassment, and falsified reports inside your manufacturing plant." Gasps erupted around the room. Hale shot to his feet. "Those allegations are ancient history. They were never substantiated. They were never investigated," Henry corrected. He lifted the pages. "But they're substantiated now. With signatures, witness accounts, dates, everything you hoped would stay buried." The reporter stood, camera raised. Hale lunged forward. You don't get to rewrite history. History rewrites itself, Henry said quietly. When truth finally comes to light. Then he turned to Alice, not Hale. His voice gentled. Your father didn't protect my father, but you tried to protect me, even when it cost you. Her eyes glistened. Real emotion, real recognition. Hale pointed at Henry, desperation cracking through his facade. He's manipulating you. He's here to destroy this company. No, Alice said, finally rising. He's here because you tried to destroy him, and because you knew that hurting him meant hurting me. Her voice grew stronger, steadier. But you miscalculated, Richard. She stepped beside Henry openly, publicly, defiantly. I don't break that easily. Hale stared, stunned. Alice addressed the board. There will be an independent investigation into these allegations. Effective immediately, and until it's complete, Richard Hale is suspended from all leadership duties. Hale exploded. You can't do that. Caleb entered the room just then, legal documents in hand. Actually, he said calmly, she can. And she just did. Hale's fury hit its apex. His voice cracked with rage. This is a setup, a conspiracy. But the board wasn't looking at Hale anymore. They were looking at the papers, at Henry, at Alice standing beside him, unshaken, at truth. And history was no longer on Hale's side. For the first time, Henry felt the weight begin to shift. Not entirely, not safely, not permanently, but shift. Alice glanced at Henry soft, grateful, shaken at the edges, a silent message. We're not done, not safe, not yet. But they were no longer fighting separate battles. They had crossed a line together, and Hale, red-faced, trembling, knew it. War had been declared, but for the first time, Henry Reed and Alice Whitmore were standing on the same side of the battlefield, and the world had just witnessed the first blow. Henry had seen anger before, quiet anger, loud anger, righteous anger, but nothing compared to the volcanic, unhinged fury twisting Richard Hale's face as security escorted him out of the restaurant. Hale wasn't shouting anymore. He wasn't threatening. He was silent. And that silence was more dangerous than any outburst. Alice watched him go, her fingers curled tightly around the back of her chair. Only when the doors swung shut did she exhale, shaky but controlled. Caleb stepped to her side, murmuring updates, legal jargon, board procedures. But Alice wasn't hearing him. Her eyes were locked on Henry. The room buzzed with whispers, reporters scribbling, board members debating in low, urgent tones. But Henry saw only her trembling just enough for him to notice, strong enough that no one else could. He moved closer, slowly, carefully. She inhaled, steadying herself. We need to go, she whispered. Not a request. A necessity. Caleb nodded. Use the side exit. Cameras are swarming the front, the three of them left together. Alice between the two men who had chosen her tonight, for different reasons but with equal loyalty. Outside, the evening air was sharp and cool. Reporters clustered near the entrance like vultures circling fresh carrion, but none spotted them slipping into the alley where a black sedan waited. Caleb opened the back door. Alice, go. I'll handle the press and coordinate with legal. She placed a hand briefly on his arm. Thank you. When she slid into the back seat, Henry followed without hesitation. The door shut, sealing them in the quiet dark. The driver pulled away. For several long seconds, neither spoke. The city lights blurred past the windows, bright, chaotic, indifferent. Finally, Alice brought her hands to her face, fingers pressing against her temples. Not crying, just overwhelmed. Henry kept his voice soft. You did the right thing. I did the only thing, she whispered. There's a difference. She leaned back, eyes closing. This will explode by morning. Shareholders, reporters, government regulators, and Hale. He won't stop. Suspension isn't enough to tame a man like him. Then we stay ahead of him, Henry said. She opened her eyes, studying him in the dim car light. You walked into a board ambush for me. You walked into it for the company, he said gently. I walked in for you. Something flickered in her expression, fear, gratitude, something warmer she wasn't ready to name. The car turned onto a quieter street. Alice glanced out the window, then back at him. You shouldn't be in the spotlight, Henry. Now more than ever, you're a target. I've been a target since the day my father filed that complaint. This is different, she insisted. Hale won't hesitate to bury you in court or in the press. He'll use your past, twist every mistake, drag you through hell if it means he can get to me. Henry leaned closer, voice steady. Let him try. You're not fighting alone anymore. She swallowed, hard. Henry, you don't understand the scale of what's coming. Then explain it to me, he said. Show me the war so I know where to stand. Alice closed her eyes again, not shutting him out, gathering strength. Tonight wasn't just a confrontation. It was a signal, a warning shot. She lowered her hands. Tomorrow, the board will demand answers. Investors will call for emergency meetings. The media will portray this as a leadership crisis. Whitmore Global hiding historically buried worker abuse allegations. Truth needed to come out, he said. Yes, but truth can destroy people. Her voice tightened. Especially people like me. What about people like me? Henry asked quietly. She opened her eyes. You've been hurt enough, she whispered. I don't want to be another weight on your shoulders. He reached for her hand in the dimness. She didn't pull away. Alice, he said softly, loving someone isn't a weight. It's a choice. Her breath caught so subtly he might have missed it had he not been watching her as if she were the only light in the world. The car slowed, stopped. The driver glanced back. Miss Whitmore, we're at your residence. Alice hesitated. Henry, come up. Before he could respond, she added quickly, not for anything except safety. I don't want to be alone right now, he nodded. Then, I'm not going anywhere. They rode the elevator to the 32nd floor penthouse in silence. Not cold silence, charged silence, the kind that comes after shared battle. When the doors opened, Henry stepped into a space that matched Alice's image perfectly. Clean lines, cool tones, modern art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But beneath the elegance was something else. Loneliness. The quiet ache of someone who had climbed so high she could no longer hear her own heartbeat. Alice slipped off her heels and set them neatly near the door. Make yourself comfortable, she murmured. Henry didn't sit. Not yet. He watched her move to the kitchen island, bracing her hands against the marble. The facade she'd held all evening cracked at the edges. I thought I was prepared, she whispered. For tonight. For Hale. For the board. She shook her head. But I wasn't prepared for you stepping in like that. He walked toward her, slow, steady, not invading, approaching. I told you, he said gently. I'm here. She lifted her eyes to his, vulnerable in a way he had never seen from her, not even when they were teenagers. Henry, what if this destroys everything? Then we rebuild, he replied. She stared at him, as if searching for the flaw in his conviction, searching for the selfishness, the ulterior motive, the lie. But Henry was too tired of lies, too tired of being cautious, too tired of carrying regret. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart. You're not, he said. You're the reason it's coming back together. Her breath trembled. He stepped closer. Alice, she didn't pull back. You fought for me tonight, he said. Now let me fight for you. Something broke in her expression, a wall crumbling, a guard lowering. Her voice was the softest he'd ever heard it. Henry, I'm afraid. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to step away. His hand brushed her cheek, warm, gentle, grounding. Good, he whispered. Fear means you still care. Her eyes glistened, not tears, but truth surfacing after years of burial. She leaned into his touch. He didn't kiss her. He didn't pull her close. He simply held her there, his hand on her cheek, her breath mingling with his, as the city lights shimmered beyond the windows. For Alice Whitmore, strength had always meant standing alone. Tonight, strength looked different. Tonight, it looked like allowing herself to lean. After a long, trembling moment, she whispered, "Stay with me tonight, Henry. Not romantic, not intimate, just human, needing safety, needing presence, needing someone who wouldn't vanish when the world darkened." Henry nodded. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since childhood, Alice let herself believe him. Henry slept lightly on Alice's couch that night, not because he was uncomfortable, but because every instinct in him stayed alert, protective. The penthouse was quiet, the kind of stillness that came only after a storm. Around 3 in the morning, he caught the soft sound of footsteps. Alice emerged from her bedroom wearing an oversized sweater, her hair slightly tousled. She paused when she saw him sitting up. "Did I wake you?" she whispered. "No," he said. "Did you sleep?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Too many thoughts." He nodded. "Come here." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, a lifeline. She crossed the room and sank beside him on the couch, pulling her knees close as the city lights flickered across her face. For a long moment, she just breathed, slow, controlled, deliberate. "Henry," she murmured, "I need you to understand something before tomorrow comes." "Tomorrow," he repeated softly. "Or the storm waiting behind it?" She gave a faint, humorless smile. "Both." She shifted slightly, turning toward him. "Tonight, what happened at that restaurant?" Her voice wavered. "It felt like every nightmare I've ever had about losing control of the company, losing my credibility, losing everything I've built. But you didn't break," Henry said gently. "You stood your ground." "I stood my ground," she whispered, "because you were there." The admission landed between them like a confession sealed with breath. Henry held her gaze. "Alice, you've stood alone for years. One night of not being alone doesn't mean weakness. It means risk," she said. "And I don't know how to risk myself anymore." "You risked everything tonight," Henry countered. "And you did it for truth." Her eyes softened. "I did it for you too." The honesty of it struck him quiet, fierce, and unguarded. She leaned back into the couch, eyes drifting toward the window. "The board's emergency session starts at 9, she murmured. "They'll grill me, demand explanations, demand reassurances. They'll ask me if I knew about the historical abuse allegations, if I tried to suppress them, and they'll ask about you." Henry nodded. "I'll leave the building if you want me to. I don't want to make things harder." She turned sharply. "No." The word came out too fast, too raw. She steadied herself. "No," she repeated quietly. "You shouldn't disappear. That's exactly what Hale wants." Henry tilted his head. "What do you want?" Her answer came without hesitation. "I want you there." He felt the truth of that settle into the deepest part of him. "Then I'll be there." She exhaled shakily, as if the promise released something inside her she'd been clutching for too long. "Henry," she whispered, "I don't think you understand what you stepped into tonight. Hale, he's not going to stop. He's going to come after us with everything he has left." "Then let him," Henry murmured. "He's finally fighting someone who fights back." She looked at him, long, quiet, searching. "Why now?" she whispered. "After all these years, why are you still fighting for me?" He didn't look away. "Because I never stopped wanting to." Her breath hitched, a tiny sound, fragile and real. She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing his, and in that gentle contact, something fragile but undeniable sparked between them. Not romance, not desire, something deeper, recognition. "Henry," she murmured, "I don't know how tomorrow will go. I might lose everything." "You won't lose me," he said. Her eyes glistened, no tears, just a brightness that said she believed him even though she wished she didn't. "I don't want to depend on you," she whispered. "It scares me." "Good," he replied softly. "It scares me too." She let out a shaky breath. "Stay with me a little longer?" "As long as you need." She leaned her head on his shoulder, tentative at first, then fully resting as tension drained from her body. Henry exhaled slowly, grounding himself in the moment. The woman who had carried the weight of a corporation was allowing herself to rest. With him, just him, dawn crept slowly over the horizon, its pale light washing over the city. Alice eventually drifted to sleep against his shoulder, and Henry sat still, steady, the way a foundation stands beneath a home. When she finally stirred, lifting her head, her eyes widened slightly. "You stayed awake the whole time?" she whispered. "I wasn't tired," he lied gently. She gave him a look soft, knowing, but didn't challenge it. Instead, she sat up and brushed a hand over her hair. "I should get ready. I'll make coffee," he said. "You can use the kitchen?" "Pretty sure I can figure it out." For the first time that day, she smiled. A small, genuine curl of the lips that brought back memories of the girl he once loved before legacy, before fear, before responsibilities carved her into steel. He stood and walked to the kitchen while she disappeared into the bedroom. As the coffee brewed, Henry stared out at the sunrise, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Today would decide everything: the board, the media, the fate of Whitmore Global, and maybe even the fate of their relationship. Alice returned, dressed in a charcoal suit sharper than any battle armor. Her shoulders were straight, her chin lifted, but her eyes sought him immediately, as if grounding herself in his presence. He handed her a mug. "Drink." She obeyed without protest. Then, after a long sip, she whispered, "Henry?" "Yeah, thank you." He nodded once. "Always." They left the penthouse together, stepping into the elevator side by side, not touching, not speaking, but aligned. When the doors opened at the ground floor, the world outside was already waiting. Reporters, cameras, questions thrown like knives. Alice inhaled. Henry stepped half a pace behind her, exactly where support should be. A silent vow, a silent shield. She walked forward through the storm. He followed. The battle for truth had begun, and they would face it together. The boardroom was already full when Alice entered, the heavy glass door closing behind her with a muted thud that seemed to echo through every chest in the room. 12 executives sat around the long walnut table, their expressions carved in stone, some wary, some accusatory, some unreadable. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the tension had the weight of a televised trial. Henry stepped in behind her, silent and steady, and though he wasn't a board member, no one dared ask him to leave. His presence alone shifted the air. Alice walked to the head of the table, heels clicking with a rhythm that masked the storm swirling beneath her ribs. Henry took a position against the far wall, hands folded, eyes never leaving her. She drew strength from that quiet, unspoken strength. Caleb entered moments later, clutching a binder of documents prepared overnight. He nodded subtly to her. She nodded back. It was time. "Miss Whitmore," Board Chair Eleanor Graves began, removing her reading glasses. "This emergency session has been convened to address the allegations presented last night regarding historical abuse within our supply chain. Your decision to suspend COO Richard Hale, and your prior knowledge of these matters. You may begin your statement." Alice inhaled. "Thank you, Chairwoman Graves." Her voice carried through the boardroom, calm, unwavering. "Last night, we were confronted with evidence that Whitmore Global's former subsidiary used illegal labor practices under Hale's watch. These actions were immoral, illegal, and fundamentally opposed to our values as a company." A murmur rippled across the table. Alice continued, "The moment I verified the authenticity of that evidence, I made a decision, one that I knew would ignite controversy, one that I knew would cost me support. But leadership demands truth, even when truth threatens everything." She paused, scanning each face. "I suspended Richard Hale because it was the only ethical choice. Not because it was convenient, not because it was strategic, because it was right." One board member, a silver-haired man named Winslow, leaned forward. "Miss Whitmore, no one disputes the severity of these allegations. But did you or did you not conceal these findings before last night? Alice opened her binder. I became aware of unverified rumors months ago, rumors Hale worked aggressively to bury. My internal request for an independent audit was delayed repeatedly under the justification of operational priorities. She clicked the remote. A screen lit up behind her, displaying a timeline of memos, ignored audit requests, and Hale's handwritten notes. Gasps filled the room as his obstruction became clear. These are his attempts to suppress the investigation, Alice said. Not mine. Another board member frowned. And the young man involved? Henry Reed. How does he factor into this? A cold, knowing silence swept the room. Henry didn't move. Alice lifted her chin. Henry Reed brought historical documents from his late father, evidence proving Hale's involvement in the abuse scandal. These records are the only reason the truth is emerging now. A pause. Without Henry, we would still be in the dark. The board exchanged glances, startled, unsure. Graves steepled her fingers. Miss Whitmore, the board must also address whether your personal connection to Mr. Reed compromises your objectivity. Alice held their gaze without flinching. My connection to Mr. Reed has no bearing on the authenticity of the evidence. And if we question motives, let us not forget, Hale had every motive to hide the truth. Henry finally spoke, his deep voice cutting through the air like steady thunder. My father filed a complaint 27 years ago, he said. He was ignored because he was a black factory supervisor going up against a powerful white executive. The room froze. Henry continued. This isn't just a corporate scandal. It's racial injustice that's been rotting under the floorboards for decades. No one breathed. Alice turned slightly, eyes softening, proud of him, grateful for him. Henry went on. You're not just deciding the company's future today. You're deciding whether the truth matters only when it's convenient, or whether it matters all the time. His words lingered, heavy and unshakable. The board shifted, shaken to their cores. Alice stepped forward again. We stand at a crossroads, she said. Either we become the kind of company that punishes the whistleblower and protects the abuser, or we become the kind of company that faces its past and rebuilds with integrity. She closed her binder with a soft click. I choose the latter, and I am prepared to face whatever consequences come with that choice. A long silence followed, a silence so deep it bordered on spiritual. Then Caleb rose unexpectedly. Madam Chair, he said quietly, I would like to speak. Graves nodded. Caleb turned toward the table. I have worked under Miss Whitmore for 7 years. I have seen her make impossible decisions, always with the welfare of this company in mind. If she says Hale obstructed justice, I believe her. If she says the evidence is real, I believe that too. He hesitated, emotion tightening his throat. And I will follow her leadership even if it costs me my job. A crack appeared in the board's rigid facade. Graves finally nodded. We will deliberate. The board filed out, leaving Alice, Henry, and Caleb in the silent room. Alice exhaled shakily. That could end my career, she whispered. Or save the company, Henry said. Caleb placed a gentle hand on her back. Whatever happens, you did the right thing. She looked between them, her two unlikely pillars. Stay? She asked softly. Both of you? Henry nodded. Always. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. When the door reopened, Graves stepped in alone, her expression unreadable. Alice stood. Henry's chest tightened. Graves lifted a document. The board has voted. A pause that held the weight of fate. Effective immediately, Richard Hale is terminated from Whitmore Global. Alice closed her eyes, relief shaking through her body. And, Graves continued, the board has unanimously reaffirmed its confidence in your leadership, Miss Whitmore. You will remain CEO. Alice's breath broke. Caleb grinned. Henry stepped forward, hope blooming across his face. But Graves wasn't finished. One more thing, she said, softening. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Reed, the board encourages transparency. If the two of you intend to navigate this storm together, Be honest with us, with the public, with yourselves." Alice's cheeks warmed, but she met Henry's eyes. For once, she didn't look away. "I intend to," she whispered. Graves nodded and exited. The room fell quiet. Alice's hands trembled. Henry moved to her slowly, giving her time to stop him. She didn't. When he reached her, her breath shuddered out. "It's over," she whispered. "No," Henry corrected softly, taking her hands. "It's beginning." She exhaled a laugh that turned into something tender, vulnerable. "Henry, what do we do now?" He drew her closer. "We tell the truth," he murmured. "We rebuild, we heal, and maybe we finally stop running." She looked up at him, the girl he once loved and the woman she had become all at once. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. "Good," he said, lowering his forehead to hers, "because neither am I." Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions hovered like rain clouds. But when Alice stepped through the doors, Henry at her side, she didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She spoke, clear, strong, fearless, and the crowd listened. For the first time in decades, truth had a voice. And justice, quiet, steady, long overdue, finally took its place beside it. At its heart, this story reminds us that justice is not always loud, and love is not always easy. Sometimes the truth hides for decades, waiting for someone brave enough to face it, and sometimes two people spend half a lifetime learning that strength isn't found in standing alone, but in choosing to stand together. The past may wound us, but it also shapes us, and when we finally confront it with honesty and courage, we give ourselves a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to love without fear.